going to teach you on the lovely Amber here, my model today, a lived-in blonde technique. It is a partial technique, so it's gonna take you no time to do, and it's just really, really easy. So let's dive in. First, I'm gonna show you my sectioning. So I like to find the low part of the crown back here, kind of where it starts to dip down, and that is where I section all the way to the ear. The reason I do that is so that you can get all of these hairs that lay over on the crown blonde without having to dive down any further, and you're gonna get almost a full blonding effect, and you'll still get the depth from underneath here without having to do a full. So I'm just gonna clip those off. And always, I like to work off of their part. So ask them where their part is, where they normally part their hair, if they flip-flop at all. And if they do tend to flip-flop like from one side to the other in the middle, always go off of the middle, but try and go off of their part so that it looks perfect when it is parted. Now I like to use salon scale when I mix because it measures out everything you're using and the product cost of the exact amount that you're using, and keeps track in a Bluetooth app. So it is very, very handy to keep track of your product cost down to the penny, which is super helpful behind the chair. So I always like to keep track of everything as I'm mixing it. It also keeps it in your history. So if you have your client back next time and she wants exactly what you did last time, and of course you don't remember, just go into your app and it will show you. Now I'm using 20 volume on her today because even though she is a natural dark blonde, she does tend to lift slowly. So I like to bump it up just a little bit for her. And then if you don't have this little mixer in your Salon by Eco Tools, you need one. It is the best. It'll mix it up to the perfect consistency every time, and I feel like you actually get more out of your bowl using this than when you mix it by hand. And then I always add Olaplex into everything I do. I like to be conscious of the hair's health and keep it as healthy as possible. So the technique I'm going to show you today is great for a really natural money piece that's still a statement, still gives you that pop of blonde around the face. And you're going to be rooty, but have those ribbons of blonde that just seamlessly blends in, kind of like her grow out. Now we did her color, I want to say like 3 months ago, so she's coming in a little bit sooner than we normally would. But this technique works perfect on someone that has a lot of roots and natural dimension and really, really bright ends. We can always add the bright ends, but I'm not going to show that today because she has the blonde already. All right, so we always want to be conscious of the way that they naturally wear their hair. A lot of girls wear their hair up in a ponytail, so you never want to leave it dark underneath here and have that skunk look of blonde back up here and dark back here. So whenever you're giving someone a money piece, don't just do it around the front of the hairline, you want to do the entire hairline. And I like to look at the way that their hairline naturally is and go off of that. So she has these kind of peaks right here. So I'm going to take a section right off of that so I can get that peak on the bottom and include it into my foil. You don't want to spend too much time back here. It's just to add some pops of blonde. So I'm just going to quickly weave that, and we're going to tease that as well because we want some natural shading at her roots. Now you'll see with more videos that I am very conscious of everything I'm doing. I am a perfectionist, so I'm very, very detail oriented. So everything needs to be perfectly blended in the foil before we even head back over to the bowl. Because if it's not perfectly blended in the foil, a color melt's not gonna save you. A color melt only lasts like, let's say a month. So when that fades and washes out, you are left with exactly what you saw before you color melted her, which means if your foil is not perfectly blended, when that color melt fades out, they are going to have harsh lines, and that is not going to last them enough for a lived-in color. So really be conscious of how you are foiling their hair and blending that in. So I'm gonna do probably 2 or 3 back-to-back weaves back here for that pop of blonde when she wears her hair up on this side. Those 2 foils were like her entire peak that we saw. So I think we're gonna be good with 2 back here for now. Same thing, we're teasing all of those baby hair new growths out of the foil. So when you comb that out, it is your natural lived-in shadow root. So just get those hairs out of the way. And then I will show you on the next foil kind of how I'm doing this upside down backwards foil. Another little trick is when you see these beads of lightener, just blur that in with your finger so you don't see them anymore. Otherwise, you'll get a little kind of like a leopard spot right there. That's not cute. All right, so 2 is good enough on this side, so we're gonna repeat that on the other side. Now, back here and on the sides of the head, I'll do the same. I like to do the foil this way because it's easier to get really close to the scalp versus the traditional way of holding the foil the other way, because otherwise your foil is going to slip and it's not gonna be secured in as well, and that's where you might get leopard spots again. So I really like to do this backwards foil technique. So we got our 2 foils on each side. Now I'm going to connect them down in the middle. Some clients have a very narrow hairline that the 2 foils on each side will meet in the middle, and you don't need to do this step. But like I said in the beginning, just follow your client's natural hairline and put the foils where you see fit. Okay, so usually I will pay attention to how much hair they have back here, and either I can leave this section out and just go from up here, which is why we went so low back here. But for her, she has a lot of darkness living back here, and I want to break that up just a little bit. So I'm literally going to take 2 sections, really big like this. I'm going to weave just the top, and I'm going to tease the heck out of this section. Now you can already see she has a lot of previous blonde living here, but I just want to bring that up a little bit. And I want my peak to be up on the side of her ear, so almost making a V section back here that's going to be very natural, like the sun would naturally kiss her hair. So these, I'm just going to do an open air balayage technique on these 2 pieces back here. I don't want them to be as bright of a statement as our foils, but I just want to brighten this up just a titch. All right, so now we're gonna start on the side of her head. I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this other side as on this side. And again, I like to be very conscious of their hairline. You can see everyone always has a deep recession here, a lot of baby hairs. So you wanna make sure that you are taking your sectioning off of this. Be very conscious of the hairline. So first, I like to take my first sectioning right in the center of that recession, kind of like you would be doing a mohawk parting. I'm gonna clip that up out of the way, and we're gonna worry about that later. We're gonna start down here, and we're gonna start with around the face. I want it to be a very natural lived-in money piece, but I still want it to be a little bit of a pop. So I'm gonna take my first section right here, because that's the way her hairline naturally goes. I'm gonna get this up and out of the way. And I'm going to weave this, but first I'm going to take out those little baby hairs. And then I'm gonna weave this section. And we're gonna go really close here. Again, I'm gonna take this foil and any little baby hairs that I missed from just before, I'm gonna get those out of the way. I like to do that because it leaves everything very natural and lived in, and again, it gives you an extra insurance of blend. It's kind of like a little baby tease. So again, be very conscious not to paint on the previous blonde. You're only painting on the dark hairs. And there's your first Mighty Piece foil. The next one I'm going to take right behind that, and this one's going to be a baby slice because I want it to be a pop. Now you'll see in future videos too, I do everyone's money piece different, and I never do the same sectioning twice on someone. I like everything to be very lived in, organic, and natural. So if you start doing the same sectioning on them every single time they come in, it gets to be very cookie cutter, and you're gonna see that pattern, and it's gonna look very much like a pattern and not like it was just naturally kissed by the sun. All right, now we kind of hit the start of this side. So first, I'm going to live and act as if this is two sections right here, and I'm gonna complete my section here. So I'm gonna take a section like this, meeting from here to probably about the start to half of her, like the upper top of her ear. And that made a little tiny triangle because I wanna leave just a little bit of depth behind that slice that we just did. And then I'm going to weave this section. This ensures that as she's wearing her hair up in a ponytail, you're still really blonde here as well. Now you'll see in a lot of the foils, I kind of start like this and I leave like an inch just to get the color on, because if you start way up here by doing this, you're making that line. And then you'll see I feather up. That just gives it an extra blended effect because the blonde is starting at different points. Like I said, we're all about making sure it's very blended in the foil. And then we're gonna do kind of the same thing. We're gonna make that mini triangle again, but this time we're going to where our foil meets back here. Now you might have to do like 3 of these sections depending on how big their, how wide their section is here according to their head shape. But for her, 2 foils were perfect. Same thing, we're gonna weave, and I'm going to do a big like slice right there and then weave back here. Those baby hairs out of the way. Now sometimes you'll see that they don't want to go all the way up. I take a little clip and I clip those out of the way. All right, now I'm going to focus on the rest of her money piece right here. She has a lot of these baby hairs that sometimes I lighten, sometimes I leave out. It depends on the person. I'm going to leave these out for right now, and I'm going to take a section right behind that, going off of her natural hairline. I'm going to weave this one, but she's you can see that she's very fine in the start, and then a little bit thicker back here. So I'm going to slice this and weave this so that it's a little bit more cohesive. And again, we're going to tease those little hairs out that we don't want to be a part of this. I'm clipping that one out of the way so I have a clean working space, and those little hairs that we weaved out are going with that. All right, we're going to take a slice right behind that. Keeping up with what we did here, we did a weave and then a slice. Up here we're going to do a weave and then a slice. snapper here, I kind of will put some on, and then I'm just gonna push up into it. And that will naturally give you a little bit of tease too, because this brush that I'm using has a very feathered bristle. And then we're gonna take one more, because their temples tend to be a little bit sparse. So I like to do a little bit more right there. And this one slice, and then I'm gonna weave. So this is where you want a lot of depth to naturally live, because when you're doing a lived in color, you want it to look like how the sun would naturally lighten them, and the sun really only hits the top of their head. So back here, we don't want to focus too many foils. Don't waste your time back here. So my first foil is going to start right where these two foils meet, because that's the closest point to her hairline where we want to keep a lot of the brightness. And I'm actually going to take a zigzag parting. This is another insurance that it's going to be very blended. So I'm going to see where my foil meets back here, and I'm going to zigzag to that section. And that turned out to be a very horizontal parting on her. And then we're just gonna take those little zigzags, and there was your natural weave. Now I'm gonna turn her just a little bit, and we're gonna tease this out of the way. And you're gonna move this foil to like in front of her face. This ensures that as you're blending this in and putting the lightener on, if you were to put it horizontal, when it moves this way, it's going to become a diagonal and be very lived in and natural. So it's just an easy way to ensure that it is going to live where you want it to live without having to put too much effort into thinking about it. For our next parting, I'm going to take from the exact same section, zigzagging it now towards the high part back here. That way you have a triangle again. So a lot of your depth is living back here where you want it to live. Actually, I'm gonna go opposite. We're gonna weave out the dark that I see. This is where an assistant would be helpful, but I'll just make it work. And I kind of like the amount of depth that this is, so I'm actually going to take a weave from this top section and have this be the last foil in here. All right, so technically we did 3 foils in that section, not including the hairline. The hairline is always gonna be a lot of foils if you want that blonde impact. Now we're gonna work up here. Same kind of thing, I like to work off of a diagonal, but first we're gonna do the muddy piece. So we left those baby hairs out, but I still want there to be somewhat of a statement on her. I don't want all the baby hairs to be dark because she does have a lot of baby hairs. So I'm going to take all of them into my hand, and I'm gonna just comb out the little ones. And I'm gonna take a slice of those. Right there. Clip this out of the way. And I'm gonna weave this in. And I also like to cut my foil in half for this because it is tiny. And I'm just gonna lighten those a little bit because just that little bit will make a huge difference. With the amount of baby hairs she does have, if you have a client that has a lot of baby hairs and you leave all of those out, it's gonna look like a dark hole compared to the money piece, and you don't want that. So sometimes just adding 1 or 2 foils in the baby hair just to break that up a little bit and make it look a little lighter makes all the difference. All right, so I'm going to take a slice here. Get as close to that scalp as possible. And especially for this first foil, don't be even afraid to get some of the lightener on the scalp there. As long as you're using a lightener that is safe for the scalp. And now we're going to take a slice. And as you're doing this too, be conscious of where your foils ended over here. You don't want to go past those, otherwise it's not going to connect. And for this one, I'm going to brush those little hairs up and out of the way. All right, so the money piece is done. Now we're gonna get into the top section here. I always like to go off of this point because that is where the money piece ended and the highest point to the hairline. And again, we're gonna do zigzag parting. So I am going to make a small triangle here, a zigzag. Now this section right here, if I were to pick this up, you can see that it's going to sit on this darker part that we left out here. So that is going to be perfect to have that little bit of ribbon that's going to lay on that darkness. But sometimes you might have this foil that went all the way that far, and if you were to pick this up, it'd be sitting on another highlight. So then in that instance, you would want to be leaving this foil out so you have a little bit of darkness there. You'll see I'm always rubbing out because I like to push up. It ends up hitting in these. So I'm always rubbing it up. I want her to be pretty blonde and I want it to be pretty blonde up here. So this is probably the same section size of the last foil that we took, but I want her to be a little bit blonder in this section. So I'm going to break it up into 2. Same thing, zigzag parting. We're gonna move that off and out of the way. And I'm gonna leave this first one out like we just discussed because that's gonna sit on top of this highlight. Now with this one, I do want to make sure that I'm a little bit higher up back here because this is where we left out for the crown. So I'm going to lift this up and tease so I can get that tease even closer to the root. And I'm gonna pop my foil in right under that. And I'm gonna make sure I am painting this entire thing. We're not doing this diagonal anymore. This one's more of a horizontal. And then we are left with the last section up top. So I'm gonna look at how it's looking. I'm gonna actually take like a slice off of the top of this. So that would leave a depth right over that last foil. And I'm gonna leave this. And tease this. And you can see with the last one, I made a little bit thicker of a section in the foil. And with this very last foil, I made it even thinner of a section. The last foil is gonna give you more of an impact, more of those ribbons of blonding, but it's gonna give you a little less of a blend because it is thicker. It has a little bit more of a chunkier look to it. It's not gonna look chunky, don't worry, but it has a little bit more chunk to it. Whereas this one has a little bit more, you can read through this section a little bit better. So it's thinner, it's going to be very nice and natural on top of the head. So I really like to end with a baby light of some sort. And that is it for the sides. Now, you would use your best professional judgment on these ends that we're leaving out. Some clients, I do totally hand paint and tip these out, but she is very blonde under here. So we're just gonna leave those. She really only needs a gloss and she'll be good to go. But we are gonna go and do exactly the same thing on the other side, and then we'll meet you back. Okay, so as I'm doing this side, I noticed she has a lot less baby hairs over here than she did on the other side. So I am not even gonna put a mini foil over there because I want them to kind of look cohesive and match. And by having that little baby light over on this side, it's going to make it appear a little bit lighter, which a sparser baby light will naturally look like. I also noticed that she's a little bit more sparse on this side. So I am doing less foils on this side than I did on the other. So just work with your natural hair. All right, so we're all done. We're gonna let her process. Now everyone processes differently, so use your best judgment and keep an eye on the foils. Also be conscious of your environment. If the air conditioning is on and it's too cool, or if the windows are open or the sun's shining and it's really hot in there, the foils are gonna process differently, so just keep an eye on it. You can't overuse this stuff. Like, this stuff is so good for the hair, so put as much as you need on. And then I like to brush this out with my favorite brush of all time, is the Wet Brush Back Bar. So it has the holes in the back for when it's wet. Keeps it a little more sanitary. And then I will section out in whatever pieces I decide to do, and always start from the ends up. All right, and we're gonna let this Olaplex treatment sit for 15 minutes, and I'm gonna utilize this time to go mix up her root shadow formula. All right, now I'm gonna pre-tone her with some purple shampoo, but I'm only gonna do it about at the roots because we're gonna wet balayage her ends to bump them up a little bit, so I'm gonna pre-tone those after that sits on. When it looks this blended before you even do your color melt, that's what you're shooting for. And now when I do the root melt, I like to do about go 2 inches down in the back and then work my way up to 1 inch and then really just tapping around the face. We're not root melting the back very much because we didn't really put any foils back there. So there's no need. I made a formula that matched her natural, so there wouldn't be any need to darken up her base and redo the entire head or anything like to take these vertical sections. I feel like it's the easiest way to ensure that you're getting every single piece of hair and you're doing them all cohesively. I found that when I was doing horizontal sections, I would drag the color down too far, and sometimes it would be a little bit farther down of a root than you would like it to be. These sections on the side I was doing about 1 inch. And now where I meet the half of her ear, like the top of her ear, I'm really doing maybe 1/2 inch. And then I'm gonna leave out this money piece till after I'm done with the other side. So I like to leave the money piece out until a little bit later because I don't want this bright to get too dark. So we're leaving that sit. We're gonna do the wet balayage on her ends now. And when you wet balayage, you really only want to apply to the blonde. She has a lot of darkness back here, so I am going to tease this just a little bit just to make sure we're not heading any of that dark. Kind of push some of the dark out, and you can see a lot more blonde, so I'm only touching those down here. Just make sure it's really saturated in there. Now you could use a brush too to brush through this and just make sure it's really saturated. I'm pretty confident that, you know, I'm only wanting to bump this up 1 level, so I'm pretty confident. All right, so this is gonna sit for 15 minutes now. All right, so we have 5 minutes left of her processing. So I am gonna go through and tap the money piece now. I really just like to lightly tap because I don't wanna get rid of this bright blonde, but I don't want, when you are doing a lived-in color, it's very rooty all throughout here, and you don't want this stark bright blonde right to the scalp with everything rooty and like 2-inch down highlights. It does not look cute. It does not look natural. The closer I get to the front, the less product I want on my brush. Take a comb to comb through and make sure that's really blended. You can see the wet balayage really just bumped her ends up a little bit. So we're gonna purple shampoo that now. All right, so now I'm gonna go through and apply the gloss toner. And I like to do this in quadrants, just work fast so that they're all processing about the same amount of time. I like to start in the back and work my way forward because I don't care if the back gets a little bit darker. We don't want the front to get a little bit darker. I also like to section off the money piece and do that last. Make sure to get the foils you put underneath. And then I kind of just take what's ever left on my hands and run it through the money piece, especially at the roots, because they always lift so well around their face that it only needs a little touch. The ends we didn't touch because they were previously lightened, so. And then process this however long you like. I'm going to let her sit for 8 minutes because she lifted so well and the purple shampoo took a lot of that. You can see she's really bright around the face, but it just blends seamlessly with the sides It goes a little bit more dimensional in the back once you get to the crown, which is what happens from those triangle sections that we took. And then if you see the back, you can see how it all lays beautifully, and she has these ribbons of blonde back here too. That's from us taking that deep parting and leaving all this depth out under here. It just lays on top of that. Looks so lived in, nice, yet still bright. If you'd like to see more, click the subscribe button. Also head over to all my other social channels for different versions of some education. Thanks for watching.